Thank you, Dr. Esfeld. We'll start with Senator Scott from Florida.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Dr. Isfeld, in your testimony, you talk about USAID funding gain-of-function experiments through DEEP VZN, the program which specifically conducts experiments geared toward pandemics in virology, and Stop Spillover, which, as you know, researches spillover between animals and humans. Can you talk about what these programs specifically are and why they may be dangerous?
Deep Vision and Stop Spillover are extensions of USAID's long-running PREDICT program, the goal of which was to predict pandemics. That is, to identify viruses in the wild that had a good chance of spilling over and causing a pandemic in humans. And this is part of the laudable One Health program, which seeks to identify essentially hotspots where viruses are likely to spill over into humans and cause a pandemic. Idea is if we find these hotspots, educate the community, teach them what to do in the event of an outbreak, then we might be able to stop it before it reaches our shores. That makes sense. But again, they don't seem to have thought of the security issues associated with publishing a list of pandemic-capable viruses by threat order. Now, we can't necessarily know whether a given pandemic would take off until it's spreading in humans. But there's a narrow set of laboratory experiments that can tell us, does it look like a human endemic virus in certain traits? And these are a tiny subset of all experiments that really aren't very useful for anything else. They don't help with therapeutic development. So part of PREDICT was to take samples of these viruses, bring them back to the lab, run these kinds of experiments, sequence the genomes, share them. They didn't find anything particularly scary, but they found some candidates that looked fairly nasty, including at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And it's hard to know what USAID did and did not approve, but they are listed as an acknowledgement, as is NIH, on a paper that recombined those dangerous-looking but definitely not pandemic-capable viruses, and then performed experiments to see did they look like they could plausibly cause pandemics.
So do you think these programs are dangerous?
I think any program attempting to identify an agent that would be widely accessible and could be deliberately released to kill millions of people is pretty much the definition of dangerous, yes.
Okay. Do you think that USAID, whose main job is to provide humanitarian aid globally, has the oversight for programs and experiments like Stop Spillover and Deep VZN, which are not humanitarian in nature?
I think there's a very strong humanitarian case for preventing pandemics. I think that the absence of security oversight means that USAID was probably just not aware of the security consequences of their work. And it remains to be seen whether they will decide that it is inadvisable to maintain a ranked order list of the most threatening viruses.
So do you think they have the oversight ability to handle this job?
It's unclear exactly who they're seeking advice from. My understanding is that they are seeking advice from folks with greater security expertise. And the real question is what actions are going to come of that.
So would these programs go through a P3CO review?
My understanding is that federally funded research does go through P3CO review. However, it is unclear whether the basic Find the Pathogens program would go through such review, because until you find it and at least run some characterization to determine whether or not it looks like a pandemic virus, it would not necessarily be regulated. And as previously mentioned, due to the transparency issues with that committee, it's very much unclear what their remit is and is not.
Okay. Do you know who's on the panel for P3COs?
I do not.
Why wouldn't, is it not public?
My understanding is it is not public.
Why wouldn't it be public?
That is an excellent question.
So do any of the witnesses know why it wouldn't be public?
No.
Is it part of
I know it isn't public, and I don't know why it is not.
So it's part of our federal government, right?
Correct.
And so what do they think Americans are not smart enough to understand it?
You'll have to ask the people at NIH.
Do you know how they made the decision not to make the names public?
I don't.
Okay. So for each of you, do you think that the P3CO review is comprehensive enough on NIH grants, or do you think gain-of-function grants have been approved without a P3CO review?
Let's go to Dr. Ebright's. I want to leave him out of the, and we'll go through each of you. Dr. Ebright, would you like to respond to that?
Yes. So as I mentioned in my summary statement, there have been only 3 P3CO reviews in the 4.5 years that the P3CO framework has been in effect. The majority of gain-of-function research of concern, enhanced potential pandemic pathogen research supported by NIH has not undergone P3CO review. It has not undergone P3CO review for the simple reason that the NIH has not identified and flagged the proposals as subject to P3CO review and has not forwarded the proposals for P3CO review.
When we ask the other two to respond as well.
Yeah, I think just echoing Dr. Ebright, it's been a failure, I think, at this point in time, and so we need to find an alternative, which is perhaps to take it out of the NIH, make the oversight outside of the agency that's funding.
One major problem is that gain of function is a terrible term. It applies to most of biotechnology in the raw, and you can try to add qualifiers as you want. But it also inherently does not catch efforts to identify perfectly natural but nevertheless highly lethal pandemic-capable viruses. And it really doesn't matter where the thing comes from. What matters is, do you know that there is a good chance that it causes a pandemic? And again, maybe you don't think we can ever be confident more than, say, 50% for a given virus. But if you get a list of 8 viruses that you're 50% confident, it's possible to make all 8, let them go, and you have got pretty good odds there. So I am concerned by efforts to continue to focus on gain of function because it is so ill-defined, and it seems more productive to narrow in on the classes of experiments that can substantially increase our confidence that a virus is pandemic capable, wherever it comes from. And I certainly echo the calls for external security oversight.
Do you think there's appropriate oversight of existing research after it's been approved to ensure continuous compliance? Or do we
I would say there
anticipate
is not. Importantly, the P3CO framework does not mandate compliance. If the P3CO committee makes a decision that the research may not proceed, that decision is only advisory to the funding agency. It is not mandated for the funding agency. The funding agency is free to accept or not accept the decision and is free to determine whether to monitor or not to monitor the progress of the work. This is a major shortcoming.
Thank you.